Okay, so because earthquakes are hazardous, it's important that we are able to prepare for them and detect them and predict them. So how do we predict earthquakes? Well, can we predict earthquakes? The answer is yes and no. We can predict them over the long term, meaning we can predict an earthquake is going to happen, within tens to thousands of years from now. We cannot predict an earthquake during the short term, meaning I can't tell you an earthquake is going to happen today. I cannot tell you an earthquake is going to happen next week, right? We can't get that precise. So one of the ways we prepare for earthquakes is instead of predicting individual earthquakes, we just predict basically risk zones, right? So we know that California is very high risk. It's very likely an earthquake is going to happen on any given day. Whereas where we are in Georgia is relatively low risk. It's very unlikely that an earthquake is going to happen on any given day. One of the ways we can predict earthquakes is with the recurrence interval. So just like we talked about the recurrence interval of volcanoes, right? On average, how often does a volcano erupt? We can do the same thing with an earthquake. On average, how often does an earthquake occur along any given fault? Okay. And we can interpret this by looking back in the rock record, right? In the stratigraphic record and the sediment record, we can see evidence of past earthquakes, whether that be because of deposits of liquefaction or whether we see evidence of tsunamis and drowned forests, things like that. We can go back in the rock record, figure out, oh, earthquakes happen here every, this many years. We know the recurrence interval for the earthquakes here. So as I said, we cannot predict earthquakes to the day or to the week, right? We're not that precise, but we can see when an earthquake is going to become more likely, right? So we can look at clustered foreshocks. That means a whole bunch of little earthquakes can sometimes mean there's about to be a big earthquake. We can look at crustal strain, right? If the shape of the earth starts to change a little bit, we can see, oh, maybe there's about to be a break. Maybe there's about to be an earthquake. Other things like we can measure the gases and wells that are escaping because of changes in shape in Earth's surface. Sometimes we think that animals can predict earthquakes coming, right? Maybe they can sense some of these other things that we're measuring and predict earthquakes coming. We can also be prepared by creating buildings that can withstand earthquakes, right? If we know how common earthquakes are going to be in a certain location, we can decide to build our buildings that can withstand earthquakes. And we build our buildings to withstand earthquakes in all of the ways. So the buildings need to be able to move back and forth like a snake, as well as go up and down like a wave, right? Because earthquakes produce both of those types of waves. If you are ever in an earthquake, especially if you're ever in a big earthquake, it's important that you know what to do. So if you are in a big earthquake, the first thing you should do, the best thing you should do is find something that you can hide beneath that is sturdy. So for example, if you're in somewhere with a table or with desks, hide under that table or desk, because if the building collapses around you, hopefully that table or desk will serve as a nice protected area and keep that material off of you. Hopefully you never have to use that tip.